Hello, everybody. How are you all? You good? I want to make an introduction to Lindsay from Chief, Attica from Google. Lindsay flew in about 3 hours ago, and you're looking fabulous, Lindsay, so
Jet
congratulations.
lag, feeling good.
Wardrobe is amazing, wardrobe and makeup. So we're here today to really talk about walking the walk. I think maybe it was 2020, June 2020, I was at the Collision conference, and they asked me to talk about how brands and businesses were responding to the George Floyd murder, Black Lives Matter momentum. And so we talked about a lot of things. I guess the biggest issue is a lot of brands were saying things but not really acting on them. And my perspective was those that were the ones that were going to kind of win walking out of this. And so walking the walk, I think, is incredibly important. The other thing we said is the first thing that needs to happen is everyone has to get their own house in order. I mean, there was a lot of urgency. It was a moment when everyone was kind of stepping back and thinking about what's next. So I think what I'd like to do is start chatting to you guys about what you did. And Lindsay, Chief was maybe a year and a half, 2 years old at the time.
Yes, we were in our infancy. So when Chief launched in 2019, we made a commitment up front to really center inclusion at the heart of what we do. And I talk a lot about, when you found a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to start with the eggs. You have to put DEI into the mix of what you do. You can't smear the eggs on later. And so when we started, we made a commitment knowing that in America, 18% of women who are women of color are VPs and above. So we said immediately, let's double that number as part of our membership to make sure that we are not just prioritizing women business leaders, but really thinking through intersectionality and prioritizing diversity and inclusion as part of our mission. Right now, we are at 35% of our members, so not quite 36, not quite double, but 35% of our members are women of color.
And your members are growing at a tremendous rate, so kudos.
Yeah, thank you. 45% of our leadership team and over 50% of our speakers and workshop leaders. We've also committed $1 million this year to nonprofits and organizations that align with our mission. And we remain committed to making sure that we are continuing to program and create community groups to center DEI.
That's fabulous. And Attica, you had not long joined Google, if I remember. I think the last person I saw before COVID was you.
That's right.
And you hadn't been there maybe more than 2 or 3 months when this whole thing unfolded. And Google, unlike Chief, is a huge, probably the largest corporation in the world. What happened at Google and what have you seen since then?
Yeah, that's true. I was only 4 months in at my time at Google. And the truth is, we had to start with our employees. We started internally. And for me, it was personal. As a Black woman, as a leader, as someone who is leading a marketing team in tech, I felt like we had a huge opportunity to not just show up, but to have that being lived from the inside out. So at Google, we really started with our product, and we looked at the places of where could we make the biggest impact at scale. And what we learned was, or I should say what we noticed was, there was a 600% increase in people who were searching for Black-owned businesses. They wanted to support Black-owned businesses and specifically support them near them. So we quickly partnered with our engineering team, and we were able to launch Search Black-owned businesses and really supporting small and medium-sized businesses during a huge crisis, because remember, it wasn't just George Floyd and the racial equity that the world was living. We're also doing that in a pandemic, and people were struggling. And just to add one more thing, one of the other things that we had done even before George Floyd and so many companies were coming at a racial reckoning is we had invested $100 million in racial equity, and we were continuing to progress that further.
Yeah, and I think what's impressive about all of those examples, is that these were actions that you took, that they were transparent, so everybody was clear about what you were promising to do, and they were measurable. So it's easy to see whether you're actually doing what you say you're going to do. I mean, one of our clients at the time, still our clients, was Goldman Sachs, and they had made an initiative for like 1 million black women. It was a program designed by and for black women. They like investing there, and they've actually, most of the money that they've committed, they've already kind of put behind those
Fantastic program.
which was kind of great to see.
Right.
What other examples have you seen that you admire, that you'd like this audience to hear about?
Yeah, so many. I think Chief is a huge one for me as a member. You know, when Lindsay started the business and I had a speaking engagement for International Women's Day and now month, someone came to me and said, you have to know about this company. And I immediately went to the website, and when the whole world was talking about empowering women, Chief said, women are already powerful. And I said, they are speaking my language, I gotta know everything about it, and I met Lindsay and the team, and it's just incredible network of women. I think one of the other ones for me is also Fenty Beauty.
Yeah.
You know, the growth that they have had, I mean, they're already valued at a $3 billion opportunity. And when other beauty brands were trying to figure out how to be inclusive, they started with inclusivity from the beginning.
At their core, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think Rare Beauty also has done a great job of centering mental illness, and so just being really clear from the get-go what impact means for them and how they want to drive change. I would be remiss to have this conversation to not mention Adidas and them, you know, moving away from working with Kanye, right? Took a couple days for them to unwind and go through everything with legal, but they did what they needed to do. It was more than just listening, they took action.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not about what you do, but it's also what you don't do.
Yes.
And the steps that you're taking to do the right thing.
And I think the more authentic you are to the business you're in, to the product, to your values, the more it resonates, right? We talked about Ben & Jerry earlier.
Yes.
We talked about Patagonia, who I think are the poster child
Yes.
for being really clear about what their values are and living them each and every day, including giving the company away, which I would say is a kind of...
Can't have a conversation about impact without talking about Patagonia.
Right.
No, they are the poster child. They're amazing. Nothing but admiration for them. So, can we talk a bit about what we think might happen now, right? So that it's been 2.5 years. We are in uncertain times. They've been characterized as many things, but I think uncertain times feels like the best characterization. What do we think companies and brands are going to do now that the purse strings are tight? My mother always said to me that, you know, when money problems come in the door, love flies out the window. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear what you think the impact is going to be.
It's so interesting. I was just reading this report that I think was launched earlier part of the year, but right after George Floyd, when we saw so many companies wanting to do the right thing, and I think there was about $67 billion of commitments made of over 210 companies within the US. And as of the time of that report, only 652 million of that had been deployed.
Can you just repeat that statistic?
67 billion was the promise, and only 652 million had been released and deployed.
And I feel like nobody gets called out for that, right? How many companies added to that commitment and just were able to kind of go under the rug and not actually act on what they had said?
And you're
How
so right,
do
and
you
it's
think
probably
we
going to
can?
get worse
I think maybe that's
during
right.
the economic downturn.
I mean, who is going to call them out and make them accountable? Like, whose job is that?
I think it's our job. I think it's everybody's job here. If you're interested in taking action, it's your job to hold people accountable.
Yep.
It is your job to remind people that we made a commitment. And when times are tough and economic uncertainty is at our door, that is when we invest more into people who are marginalized. That is when we prioritize impact, because who gets affected the most during a market downturn?
And I think the thing that we know, like if you look at all the statistics, it'll say that anybody who works for you is going to be holding you accountable whether you want them to or not. So your best talent is likely to walk out the door. We were talking about that, the recent McKinsey study about kind of women in the workplace and the fact that they are leaving in droves at leadership positions. So for every 2 women who are promoted to a director level position, so for every 1 woman that's promoted, 2 are leaving, which is a huge gap. And they're leaving because companies are not living up to their promises, and they actually state DE&I initiatives as one of those. So people are paying attention. I think your customers are paying attention. I think one of the reasons why Adidas was so responded in the way that it did is it knew that its customer base wasn't going to sit back and allow that to happen. So I think that's kind of very, 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 very encouraging. So we've got a room full of marketers, and I think the question that's probably on their mind is what can they do as individuals to kind of drive the change that we want to see, to make sure that we're walking the walk. I know you've got some initiatives at Google.
Yeah, some of the things that we're doing, and it's interesting because brands don't always get it right? Yeah. And I think so much of what we do is we want to learn with people. One of the things that we've been learning along the way, and it's been a multi-year initiative, we just launched equity for cameras that we're calling Real Tone. And not a lot of people know this, but most cameras are really focused on white skin tones. Mm-hmm. So when you shoot a black skin tone in photography, it doesn't show up as well. So we work with experts because that was not our expertise. We obviously can build the technology to make it more equitable, but we really needed to partner with someone. We partnered with Dr. Ellis Monk, who is a sociologist at Harvard, and he created something called the Monk Scale. So he, along with creators and other photographers, and we launched it earlier this year. And that was really just the belief that there is something that we can make better. And I think anytime you stay close to what you do best, and for us, we can do that at scale, you can actually drive impact.
And I think people weren't even aware that that was an issue. I remember seeing the advertising and thinking, Jesus, why didn't I not think about that or know that?
I mean, it was emotional for a lot of people with brown skin tones all over the world. I think I didn't know it was an issue, and it almost opened up something for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I remember being that little girl in a photo and not being able to see myself. So it is so important that we're able to be seen and that we actually include everyone in that opportunity.
So I think my advice for marketers in the room is if you care about this and you showed up, maybe you're just sitting here listening because you were checking your phone and it's quiet in here. If you care about impact, if you care about driving change, your job is to be that squeaky wheel. Your job is to know that as a marketer, generations, Gen Z, millennials, care about mission. They care, some boomers, but we care about doing right in the world. And so as a great marketer, your job is to actually help drive that change for your brand and bring it back inside to your company. Yeah. That's what great marketers can do. That's what you are capable of doing. And it's what sets people who are good at their job from the people who are great at affecting impact, change, helping your business, but also feeling really freaking good about what you're doing when you go home.
Yeah, and I think people, they believe what they see. There was this startling statistic that if you go to Central Park, how many statues of famous women do you think there are?
None, because every time I'm there with my son, he's always like, Mom, who's that? And I'm like, it's another white guy.
Yeah.
How many are there actually?
So,
2?
There are 2, but here's what you need to know. They're both fictional.
Out of how many?
One is Alice in Wonderland, and one is Mother Goose. So as you're kind of walking around, any little girl is walking around.
If we're including a goose as a woman statue, we have a long way to go.
A very long way to go. And I think in advertising, in marketing, we're portraying people all the time. Yeah. So we can either reinforce stereotypes or we can counter those.
Yeah.
And there's so much more work that has to happen in that area. And the thing that I kind of lay awake thinking about is we're moving into the kind of metaverse, Web 3.0. Everyone is on, everyone's talking about it. My question is, who are designing those experiences? How are we building equity into those experiences? We have a real opportunity now at this moment to really shift what it looks like in the world. Each and every one of you, I can't believe any of you are not talking about this or working on it. If you're not, you should be.
Absolutely.
But it's like, this is the moment. And then also ask who is designing these experiences. Are you including other, of people of color? Are you including women? Most of the companies that I've met with are made up of the young white guys. And while I think that's fine, that isn't going to be enough. You've got to bring the people in who are going to create experiences that they can relate to and understand and and bring to the fore.
Yeah, and it's not about taking those statues down. It's not about white
No.
guys not building the metaverse. It's about opening the doors. It's about building more statues and bringing more diverse voices into the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really goes back to being seen and heard. At Google a few years ago, we had a couple folks who started what we call the inclusive marketing practice. Because so many times, particularly if you're the only woman, if you're the only person of color, if you're someone with a disability and you might actually have an invisible difference, that you're the only one. And we said it should never be one person's, not just perspective, but actual opportunity.
Yeah.
So we have a group of consultants who actually just volunteer their time, and people whose full-time job it is, that we look at work to make it inclusive from the start, from all the way from the product to the brief,
Yep.
to how we're creating, to who's creating, to the agencies that we're partnering with, all the way to the end. And it is made, when I work with this team, I get better every day. I learn something. I can't believe I was walking around as blind as I was.
Yep.
But being able to have that internally actually helps you with the external expression.
Yeah. I think that, as someone who works with Google,
Yes.
we get, they want to know what our representation looks like, and I think that's great. But one of the things I always say to them is, when we're going to do the research, or whatever it is that we need to do to help get to the strategic solution, we need to make sure that that work is also inclusive.
Yes.
Because it gets forgotten,
Yeah.
So it's not just about making sure you have the right people in the room, but making sure the work that they do has also got all of those things built in.
Yeah, you need to operationalize DEI into the practice.
Yeah.
It's not just something you remember and check a box at the end. It really has to be a part, and it has to be in the process, baked in early.
Yeah. So we've got 1 minute left. Any parting thoughts you want to share with everybody?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is to remember that brands, companies are like people, and we sometimes get it wrong. And it's okay that we make mistakes. We're all in this journey. We actually, at Google, launched something we call All In, and it's kind of a toolkit of information that we've had, things that we've learned along the way, of sometimes getting it wrong, sometimes getting it really right, but really going on the journey together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. Lindsay?
I'm proud to see all the faces in this room. I'm proud to see how diverse Web Summit is, and I know that people here are on the forefront of making change and operationalizing these processes into their own organizations and their own marketing arms.
And I just want to give a shout out to Chief, because as we were all working our way through that, there was so much we don't know and still don't know. I think you guys did a great job of creating forums for conversation. It was, I think, probably every day there were 2 or 3 different ways that you could get engaged in those conversations, which made me smarter and helped make my organization smarter. And it goes back to build it into your product.
Yes.
Build it into what you offer, and then you'll be successful. So thank you all very much. Lovely to see you.